if you're just joining us, you are tuned into the Foxworth Theory, and I'm your host, Eugenia Foxworth. And today's guest is Lance Shipman Young. Now, Professor Young, are there enough people of color in STEM fields?
No, decidedly, the answer is no. We are still trying to build up the coffers, if you will, of intellectual capital within communities of color. So there have been societal barriers that have made it a bit more difficult for young people of color to get into STEM disciplines. A lot of that has to do with educational training, with standardized testing, what have you. So there are those barriers there that we still need to overcome. We also have to really change the conversation around STEM. What do I mean by that? So I teach chemistry at a historically Black college, and at any institution, there's always this discourse. There's always this conversation that students bring into the classroom that science is hard, chemistry is hard. I did terribly in this in high school, so I just don't have the aptitude to do this. And I think that's really wrong. It's unfortunate. What is often the case is that students have had bad experiences with bad teachers that haven't really tapped into the natural inquisitiveness that we all have as young people. Much like myself, I may have been, taking this, on steroids when I was a young person. But I was always interested in the world around me. And if you think about any young person, particularly though, if you've ever had any experience with a 4-year-old, right, you'll find that your conversation with them is always going to be based on the why ladder. They're always asking why. And this is, just a natural part of who we are as young people. But at some point, and this is a lot more pronounced, unfortunately, in communities of color, that inquisitive nature just somehow gets quelled, right? It gets quieted in such a way that we don't realize that science is, in the nature of investigation, is something that is inherently accessible to most of us. So to make a long story short, I think we do have to do better about making pathways for young people to get invested in STEM disciplines, and just really make sure that there are rewards there, so that those experiences, those training experiences are ones that pay off and have people see a place for themselves as practitioners within STEM disciplines.
Thank you. And why are STEM fields becoming more important to society today? I think you've answered a lot of things, but this in particular is important.
Yeah, so there are lots of ways to answer that question. If we just look at where we are as a society and our reliance on technology, for example. So, if you have had to fill up your car recently, you realize that gas prices are, approaching astronomical proportions, right? Paying more for gas than perhaps we ever have. So technology, I think, is going to be our saving grace there. The development of electric vehicles, that's technology at its best, right? Us being able to change the way that we are able to get around in such a way that it becomes more energy efficient, less reliant on fossil fuels. In order for that technology to emerge, there have to be people who understand that technology, right? Who are innovative and can think of new ways of bringing products to market that are going to improve our ways of life. So the electric vehicles, that's one example, right? But it's everywhere. The COVID vaccines, being able to protect ourselves against infectious agents, that relies on an understanding of infection, of how microbes are able to infect us. There's so many ways that I can just think of how science is influencing society. Making evident that science, the practice of science, does advance our society, I think is going to be the most compelling thing that we can ever put out there.
Yes, I totally agree. And on that subject, what type of education do our college age students need to have to succeed in STEM?
So first, there has to be a willingness, right? Just an openness to learning new things, to the process of investigation, and just a receptiveness to rigor. You know that the coursework is going to be somewhat difficult, and you are going to have to roll up your sleeves and work hard. So with that in mind, there's that mindset that has to come to the table first. More concretely, if we think about the curriculum itself, so a good background in mathematics. Mathematics is the language of science. A good background in mathematics is going to be important. And then, should someone pursue study in a STEM discipline, the curriculum is pretty well set up at any college or university so that, you get that foundational knowledge in the first couple of years. And then you transition to more advanced coursework and get more involved in practical training. So that usually means research at the benchtop or investigation in a corporate setting if we're thinking about technology and things like computer science and software engineering.
Thank you. So what is the future of STEM? How is STEM changing our society? What will our world look like in 5 years with STEM advancements, more or less? What do you think? Your personal opinion?
Yeah, so it's really hard to know. The sky really is the limit, right? So I have throughout my career been surprised in a good way with the advances that STEM has allowed and how transformative it has been for our society. So I think back to my time as a child when there was a television show, Knight Rider, that used to come on where there was a car that would be able to drive itself and could talk and communicate with the driver. And I really thought that I would never see those types of advances in my lifetime. Fast forward to the year 2022, and we have Teslas who be self-driving cars. We have Apple technology that allows for us to pretty much interact with our phone, to talk to our phone pretty much and have conversation, to look up information. So, we're able to approximate that environment now. And I'm really surprised by that. So that in 5 years, it's really hard to know just what society is going to look like because science and technology are developing and changing the world so very quickly. The internet is another prime example of that, right? So the internet has been around as long as I've been alive for the most part. But the way that we have integrated it into our everyday lives, the fact that you and I, from afar, are able to have this conversation, be able to talk to each other as if we were in the same room, that's a real advancement. So that in 5 years, I can only imagine that we are likely to be able to do this with holograms and things of that nature. The metaverse certainly is, we're at the cusp of really breaking through and really changing our interactions with each other by engaging each other in virtual reality. So I think that that's a really exciting and promising direction that STEM is going in now.
Yes, and thank goodness for what we're doing now. I think it saved many businesses and actually developed new businesses. I mean, technology now is like the pulse.
Exactly.
So, I mean, it's just amazing. Some people fight it. I embrace it. Sometimes.
Most of the time for me, sure.
Who is the scientist or STEM leader that you feel the world should know?
So I think the world has come to know Anthony Fauci very well over the last couple of years or so. So, I mean, he's always been kind of an icon in my mind since my early years studying infectious diseases. So I had the pleasure of meeting him. I think it was the year 2000 at a conference. And he's, the most approachable guy and really sincere, but knowledgeable. I mean, he has an encyclopedic knowledge of things, and he's really critical in his analysis of things. So I'm really glad, that he has become a prominent figure in society. So he would certainly be the first person who would come to mind. That hasn't, come without its challenges, right? So I mean, in some circles, he's been demonized And I think that's really unfortunate. But I think that the world, really understands now, the investment that he has had over the course of his career in trying to improve the quality of life for individuals by helping us fight infectious diseases.
And I agree with you. You're a New Jersey boy, and he's a Brooklyn boy.
That's right. That's right. So those are high school, if I remember correctly.
Yes. So I mean, these things are people do not realize that it's and he's paint him brown and he would be you, because I've listened to him, and it's like that old movie, You Talking to Me, when but he does. He's a strong person, a personality. I don't know him, have never met him, never been in, but just seeing him and catching the various clips on television, especially during our lockdown, it was impressive. Quick question. Is
Sure.
there a Black scientist that besides yourself that is more or less like a household name that we may not be aware of, that
That
you
we may
can
not be
think of?
aware of. I have to think
I mean,
about.
my audience, myself, my
Okay.
audience.
Okay. So another person that comes to mind as I'm thinking about impact in the realm of public health would be David Satcher. So David Satcher is a Morehouse man as well, much like myself, and served as the Surgeon General for the United States some years ago, and has really been leading the effort to improve the quality of lives for African Americans, especially as it relates to our prevention of chronic diseases. So I would certainly say that David Satcher's example is one that has been powerful in my life, and my hope is that others are able to read his work and to take his recommendations for things that we need to do in order to prevent the onset of chronic diseases. Take those things to heart and really implement them in our everyday lives.
See, what you just said is very important, but we're not getting those names within the brown and the Black communities. Perhaps in Atlanta, because of the colleges that are there, maybe, the HSBCs that we do have, but John Q. Public and Eugenia Foxworth is not reading it. And I'm a sponge. I'm constantly looking. And I just feel, you don't have to agree with me, that it, like when a kid sees a toy, a brown toy, and another toy, or whatever, they're going to relate to that particular toy. Hey, that toy looks like me. And I
Sure.
think that could have not just the local people that work with, that you see, but if it were in the news or, put out, but we don't have that. Well, I just wanted to say that to you, but I'm very, very proud that I've had this opportunity to meet you and speak to you. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today on the Foxworth Theory, which airs every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Thank you for joining the Foxworth Theory, and thank you, Professor. It's been
Thank
my
you.
pleasure to meet you, Professor Shipman Young.
My pleasure.